How's it, guys? This is Dayvy FPL and welcome back to the Fantasy Premier League video here on my channel. Now in this video we're going to be talking about everything differential. We're going to be going over my top 5 under 5% owned players. Under 5% is almost considered a mega differential. I kind of wanted to go for mega differentials in this draft to just give you guys an indication of some players that we could potentially be missing out, and these players could be, as they say, hidden gems. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So a new season calls for a new sponsor, but here on the Dayvy FPL channel we like our old, so I've brought back the old sponsor OneFootball, but with a completely new revamped app. Yes, OneFootball has gone over a complete marketing revamp, new logo, new everything. I've checked it out, looks really good. They kind of took the old app but just made it better, so I'm really appreciative of that. If you want to go check them out, link down in the description below to go download the app. If you don't know who they are, they're the biggest app on iOS and Android, so go check them out. I personally use them, so I can recommend them from a personal level. So 2 disclaimers before we start the video. The total players as of recording this video is currently 2.2 million. I expect this number to rise quite exponentially to about that 7 million mark come that game week 1 deadline. The ownerships will therefore change in this video, but as of recording these were the ownerships and that's why they're under 5%. I don't think the ownerships are going to change too much, as the players that currently have FPL teams, that 2.2 million players, I think those are considered more of the advanced players, inverted commas, and I think the more casual players will come on in the next couple of weeks. So with those casual players, they probably won't be choosing these FPL options, as they're a little bit out there and not really form part of that popular template that the casual players usually go for. So I think there still will be quite good options and differentials come that game week 1 deadline. The other thing I wanted to talk about is that differential equals good option kind of talking point. Now I wanted to address this for those of you who may be a little bit newer to FPL and kind of struggling with the terminology that we use in the FPL community. But just because a player is a differential owned by a low amount of people doesn't necessarily mean that they are a good option. The only thing about differentials that's really nice is that if they do well, you're going to be rising in the ranks quite a lot, because not a lot of people are going to be getting those points because they're so lowly owned. It can come back to bite you though if you miss out on a player that is owned by about 50% of people and that player does well, whereas your differential doesn't quite pan out. You're going to be sliding down the ranks quite a lot, so just keep that in mind. Just because they are differential doesn't necessarily mean they are going to be a good option. But hopefully in this video we're going to be covering 5 players that will be good options going into this FPL season. So the first player I wanted to highlight is going to be Harvey Barnes. So those of you who followed me last season remember when we had that double-digit haul from Harvey Barnes that one game week. That was quite a welcomed addition to our team and allowed us to go up the ranks quite a lot. So with Harvey Barnes, a lot of people are talking about Jamie Vardy, not as much as I think people should be, just because his price is a little bit more expensive than I think we can afford Jamie Vardy at, but that's why Harvey Barnes is quite an attractive option. You could also go for a Jose Perez, as he could also be a nice option. Now with James Maddison out currently injured, he is in his rehabilitation stage though, so just keep that in mind. But if James Maddison doesn't make the first or second game week, I think that only makes Harvey Barnes and a Jose Perez a more attractive option. You could argue that maybe they lack that creativity from the midfield that James Maddison offers, but then you can kind of counter that with the fact that Harvey Barnes and a Jose Perez should basically be guaranteed to start if Maddison does miss out. They start off with West Bromwich Albion and Burnley in the first 2, so Burnley's not the best fixture in the world, but definitely West Brom is a nice fixture for them, and the main fixtures after that Man City game are why you might want to bring in a Leicester option. So from game week 4 to game week 7 they play West Ham, Aston Villa and Leeds, with Arsenal there, and you know with Arsenal we never kind of know what defense is going to pitch up from them, so they could also be considering that a good game. With Harvey Barnes' ownership is currently 4.4%. I think a Jose Perez is just under that at about 3.6% if I remember correctly. Last season was a pretty good season for the winger. He had 6 goals, 10 assists, amounting to 133 points. He comes in a little bit expensive for my liking. I think he's about that 7 million mark. Last season he was about that 6.5 mark, so I think 6.5 might have been a better option, and then a lot more people would have had him in their squads. As you know, with those premium options costing so much this year, we kind of can't really squeeze out a 7 million price. But the other option you could maybe do is get him for the West Bromwich Albion game and then take him to Greenwood or maybe Rashford if you have enough in your budget. That could also be a viable strategy, but I definitely think that Harvey Barnes should be one that we look at, especially as I said from game week 4 to 7. The next option we're going to be talking about is Stuart Armstrong. So similar with Harvey Barnes, everyone's kind of talking about the forward options. Danny Ings, Che Adams, even I've mentioned Che Adams in my latest draft. So those two of the front forwards are getting the most attention. But then Stuart Armstrong comes in with 2.5% ownership. Also is at that 5.5 million mark, which is quite an attractive price considering how well he did at the end of last season. So he was kind of a player that came a little bit more into the play with the Southampton lineup towards the end of the season, and he managed 5 goals, 4 assists, and 98 points. So I think if Stuart Armstrong was basically guaranteed to start most game weeks, which I think he will be, as he did, as I say, end the season quite well, I think that he's going to be a great option and a great value option for us with those expensive premium options in our midfield. So Southampton's fixtures kind of speak for themselves here. You don't see too much red, but if you look kind of deeper, it's not the best fixtures in the world. Spurs and Burnley in there in the first 4 fixtures, but with Crystal Palace, West Brom, and Aston Villa kind of filling the gaps there, he could be a nice option, especially because he is so cheap. So you're not really worried about him getting too many points. But I think Stuart Armstrong is definitely one to talk about. You could also go for James Ward-Prowse. He comes a little bit more expensive, but is definitely also an option that we should be looking at, and not just those Southampton forwards. The third option we're going to be talking about is REECE James. So REECE James has been mentioned by quite a lot of people in the FPL community just because of the fact that he was playing at the end of last season, and he seems to be playing quite a lot of preseason fixtures for Chelsea. So he's kind of filling in at that full-back position and comes in at 3.6 million. Now the main kind of threat with REECE James is the fact that he might not play. If REECE James was confirmed to be playing every single game from now to the end of the season at that fullback position for Chelsea, I reckon he would be one of the best value for money options. He comes in at 5 million and allows a really cheap entry into that Chelsea defense, a defense that recently has been stocking up in the transfer window, and I think that that's probably the position that they should have been stocking up with, as defensively last season they weren't that great. So with new additions such as Thiago Silva at that centre back position, I reckon that Chelsea defense is going to be really good, and if REECE James comes in at 5 million and is going to be playing, I definitely think he's going to be a good option. Managed 2 assists and 61 points, but as I said, wasn't playing a lot at the start of the season, mainly played towards the end of last season. So if Frank Lampard wants to kind of play a player for the future and plays REECE James every single game week, he's definitely going to be good value for us, and the Chelsea fixtures aren't the worst in the world. But with the signings they're making, I reckon they could be one of those teams that is absolutely fixture proof this FPL season. So the second last player I'm going to be talking about is Joe Gomez. So everyone kind of knows about Joe Gomez, but the thing is he's still owned by less than 5% of people. I think this is because we heavily favor Trent Alexander-Arnold and Robertson. But with Joe Gomez coming in at 5.5 million, you're basically banking on a Liverpool clean sheet. As you can see there, no goals, no assists, managing 93 points. Still respectable, especially because he wasn't the starting centre-back at the start of the season. Kind of went on and off at that centre-back position, but I do think he's the favoured centre-back alongside Virgil van Dijk going into this new FPL season. Liverpool's fixtures are quite good, but you know with them, they are one of those fixture-proof teams. Now, if the Liverpool defence replicates the form they've been in for the last 2 seasons, I reckon that Joe Gomez can be extremely good value. So as I said, 5.5, banking on that clean sheet. If Liverpool manage to have a defensive performance again, he could be really nice value and is relatively cheap. As I said, with those premium options costing so much, some of us are even struggling to afford the likes of TAA and Robertson. So you could be a nice cheap alternative. If you want to double up, he also provides a good opportunity. You might just have to spread that budget a little bit and upgrade one of your 4.5s to a 5.5, but I definitely think he could be worth it if Liverpool are defensively strong again. So the last option we're going to be talking about, and probably the most controversial one. So DOMINIC CALVERT-LEWIN at the end of last season basically did nothing, which caused him some fame in the community because a lot of people still owned him, and basically they were holding him for one more game week, and he just wasn't scoring at all. But he did still have a respectable season last season. 13 goals, 1 assist, amassing 126 points. And the thing that I like with DOMINIC CALVERT-LEWIN is the fact that Everton have been making hopefully some good signings. They have not been confirmed yet, but they've been heavily rumored to be signing some really quality players. And if those players come in, they're not going to be a threat to CALVERT-LEWIN, as they're not really a striker position. They seem to be more midfielders. So I think it's only going to increase the threat of DOMINIC CALVERT-LEWIN, as he's going to be getting those assists into him constantly. I think that also with Richarlison doubling up there, Richarlison seems to be the playmaker and DOMINIC CALVERT-LEWIN seems to be the finisher. So I do think he could be still a good option. Everton's fixtures are being quite overlooked recently. I don't think they're in many people's teams, so they could be a nice differential. Definitely someone that I think we should be keeping our eyes on going into this new FPL season. But as I said, I think he's burnt a lot of bridges from the fact that he didn't do well at the end of last season, and I think a lot of people might be overlooking him coming into this new FPL season. So that's basically going to wrap up the video, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy it. Please don't forget to like it if you did, and subscribe if you're new or have not subscribed yet. As I mentioned in my draft video, I'll be doing a Q&A in the comments down below, so make sure you get your questions in, as I will be replying to every single comment that we do, probably for the first couple of hours, but I might be extending that depending on how many questions we get in. But I'm going to be signing off. It's me, Dayvy FPL, and I'm out. Cheers, bye.